We'll do a review on Lekut Sichas and Chelek Yudches, the fourth Sicha for the Parshas Pinchas. In this Sicha, the Rebbe quotes a Zohar that is brought down in this week's Parsha, the Zohar in Parshas Pinchas, that one who says Tehillah LeDavid, that's we call it Ashrei prayer, says it 3 times a day, is guaranteed that he's going to merit the world to come. It's a bar ben olam habo, bar alma de'osi. And the Rebbe brings down that it seems like his father's explanation on the Zohar conflicts with the explanation that the Tzemach Tzedek gives. The Rebbe explains that the Alter Rebbe, the Tzemach Tzedek explains according to the way it is in Nigla, and his father explains the statement the way it's in Pnimis Sohinyonim. It connects with the idea of the 3 davenings, the Shachris, Mincha, Ma'ariv, and whether Ma'ariv is mandatory or, as the halacha is, that it's rishus, it's only optional. That has to do with the 3 times Ashrei, as we'll see in the Sikha. Look inside now, Ois Aleph. In Zohar of the Heintige Sedra werd gebracht der Maimer, in the Zohar on today's Sedra, he brings the saying that Kol man da Omar Tehillah LeDavid b'chol yoim klazim. Anyone who says the pasuk of the parak of Tilim of Tehillah LeDavid every day, klazim, it says it 3 times every day. Ihu bar alma de'osi. So he is someone who is going to merit the world to come. He's a bar alma, son of the world to come. Meaning, if he says to David 3 times every day, he's going to be bar alma de'osi. Is mevair, and we explain. As today zimno is man mechuyev zu sagen Tehillah LeDavid. 2 times one is obligated to say Tehillah LeDavid. Begin mezoino parnosa b'chol yom. That's for the person's sustenance, his food, and his parnosa sustenance every day. So you need to say it twice specifically for the food and the sustenance. Und der dritte Mal is labig in choiva. It is not for the mandatory, the obligation, suli bakoshes anal, for the above mentioned requests of the mezoin and the parnosa. Allah begin shvacha. The 3rd time is a praise. We praise Hashem, but it's not the mandatory, which is for mezoin and parnosa. Is mevar the tate in zayna oris of the Zohar. So my father, on his notes on the Zohar, explains as the Amida from Tehillah LeDavid Klas Zimnin, that when we say Tehillah LeDavid 3 times, is Kimoy Hagimul Tefillas, that is similar to the 3 davenings. Was azoy steht beferish pirush Rashi l'shas. Actually, in the Rashi, very clearly states so in his commentary to the Gemara, Brachas and Daled Amud Beis, that Sholish Pa'amim, quoting Rashi, that you say 3 times, the Gemara says 3 times, is Keneged Sholish Tefilos, corresponding to the 3 davenings that we daven every day. Und Kishem, the Rebbe's father explains, Kishem v'tzvei tefillah shachris u'mincha zayin choiva. 2 of the davenings, which is the shachris and the mincha, are mandatory. Und tefillah arvis rishus, and the prayer of Ma'ariv is optional. Originally, arvis was rishus. Today we do the choiva, we'll mention it later too. But we're going according to the halacha, the mandahoma, that says that tefillas arvis essentially is an optional prayer. So the same thing is with saying that Tehillah LeDavid, Astrei Zimnei Chiyuvi Al Bnei Nosho, that two of them is mandatory for the people, as it says in the Zohar, that it's a mandatory, it's a choiva, and on einmal begins shvacha. And once that you say it a shvach, but this is kimoi, v'aderech tfilas arvish rishus. So that is similar. It's just like and similar to the ma'ariv is optional. So the same thing. The third tehillah leDavid is shvach, is praise, which is optional. It's not a necessity, just like Shachris and Mincha are necessities and ma'ariv is rishus. Two of the tehillah leDavid are necessities, and one is rishus. All and so what it turns out is that the third time we say tehillah leDavid is ma'ariv, is like rishus, goes according to the idea that ma'ariv is rishus and the tehillah is rishus. The Rebbe is going to show now that the Tzemach Tzedek says differently. Based that Tzemach Tzedek in Zayin Rishimis of Tehillim, in his notes on the Tehillim, the Tzemach Tzedek, bring them Pirush Rashi Hanal. He brings down the above mentioned Rashi as the Gimel Pa'amim Tehillah LeDavid Zayin Keneged Sholosh Tefillas, that the three times Tehillah LeDavid correspond to the three Davenim. On Frekt, he asked the question, Al Pizeh, hat me gedarft sagen Tehillah LeDavid euch in Tefillas Arvis. So based on this idea, we should have said Tehillah LeDavid, one of the Tehillah LeDavids, we should have said it in Ma'ariv, because the Tehillah LeDavid, the third time, corresponds to Ma'ariv. Avos zogen mir, the Gimel Pa'amim Tehillah LeDavid, why do we say these three times that we say Tehillah LeDavid? We do Tzvei Mol in Shachris, two of them we do in the morning prayers, and ein Mol to Mincha, and once to Mincha, nothing by Ma'ariv. So the Tzemach Tzedek brings down what other people answer. Andere entfern as Tfilas Arvis is nit kein Zman Efamiras Ashrei, that it's not the Davman, is Davman Ma'ariv is not a time for saying Ashrei. And the reason why they're giving it, well, Ein Zman Tefillah or Tehillah, it's not a time of prayer or praise, but Laila. Saying Tehillah LeDavid, the praise, David, the Tefillah, we don't say it at night time. There's one that's Bredaf and the Eliyahu Rabbah, or while Ein Evrim Kedusha Ba'arvis, we don't say Kedusha in Arvis. And by night time, we don't say Kedusha. But Ashrei Shaykh Li Kedusha. Ashrei has a connection to Kedusha, which is also in the Lashon of the Eliyahu Rabbah, quoted, that brings down the Ha'ara. We don't say in the evening, we don't say this Kedusha, and Ashrei has a connection to the Kedusha. Und der Fahr sagen wir Tehillah LeDavid das zweite Mal in Shachris statt Arvis. And that's the reason why we say a second time in Shachris in the Ma'ariv. So basically in Ma'ariv, it's not the right time to say Tehillah LeDavid. That's what some of the Meforshim, the Eliyahu Rabbah, bring down. That's why we don't say Tehillah LeDavid in Ma'ariv. The Tzemach Tzedek will aber nit onem dem Tirus. The Tzemach Tzedek refuses to accept this answer. Because either way, if the ganze takone von dem dritten Mal Tehillah LeDavid, if we should say that the entirely, why was it instituted to say a third time Tehillah LeDavid is b'shvil tfilas arvis? It is because of Ma'ariv. That's why we say it three times. Hat nit kein Ort zu sagen das in an ander Tefillah, so it doesn't really fit to say that Tehillah LeDavid in another prayer. It was meant for the prayer of Ma'ariv. That's why we instituted it. And it's not fit to say it in Shachris, to say it in the morning prayer. On the other hand, if imein shayich ashri ba'arvis, if it doesn't apply, the ashri, the tila, the David, doesn't apply in Ma'ariv, so then you should only say it twice. Don't say it a third time. What's the idea of saying a third time in Shacharis? Rashi says there's an obligation to say it 3 times. So one of them corresponds, Rashi says, Keneged Sholosh Tefilos. So either you do it in Ma'ariv, or if you can't do it in Ma'ariv for whatever reason, so then don't do it at all. Why saying it twice in Shacharis? Learn the Rebbe that Tzemach Tzedek. So how does the Tzemach Tzedek resolve it? So he explains it as follows: as the Maimer Hashas Kol Ha'omer Tilo LeDavid Gimel Pa'amim, the Maimer, this statement of the Gemara that says one who says 3 times Tilo David is guaranteed that is a Ben Olam Habo, is norm Leuten Man the Omar Tfilas Arvis Chayva. That only goes according to the opinion who holds that davening Ma'ariv is mandatory. If davening Ma'ariv was mandatory, so then we say you have to say it 3 times. Once by Shachris, once by Mincha, and then by the other mandatory prayer, which is Ma'ariv. Und dem dritten Mal sagt man es tak in Arvis. You would say it according to that Manda Omar in Ma'ariv. Those are the 3 mandatory times to say Tilul David in the 3 prayers. Over anon the Kaimelon Halacha Kimanda Omar Tfilas Arvis Rishus, but we rule, we know that Halacha is like the opinion that rules that says that davening Ma'ariv is optional. Zokt men nit Ashrei Koydem Tfilas Arvis. So we do not say the prayer of Ashrei before Ma'ariv. So basically, this whole statement of saying 3 times doesn't apply if we don't have to daven Ma'ariv. We don't have to say it 3 times. So we're basically, as Tzemach Tzedek says, we're not putting in the Tilo David instead of Ma'ariv. We're just putting it in there for another reason. As Tzemach Tzedek will bring down, in a minute. So according to this, it turns out, as according to the opinion that holds that davening Ma'ariv is optional, which the ruling is that we rule that davening Ma'ariv is optional, is genug amiras Tilul David zweimol, then it's sufficient to say Tilul David twice. So you don't have to say to be a Ben Olam Habo, you don't even need to say it 3 times. Twice is enough. Tzedek explains along the path of Chassidus. He explains why don't we have to say a 3rd time? As those was as miras tehila leDavid to toiv betach to tefillah shachris and mincha, that which saying tehila leDavid accomplishes during the shachris and mincha davening, but toiv gitom betefillas arvis, so that is being accomplished when dav ma'ariv lemanda omar tefillas arvis rishus me'elav on its own. So we don't need to say 3 times because it happens on its own. 2 times you say it, and the 3rd time it takes place on its own. You don't have to say to David to be in Ben Olam Habo. So why do we say the 3rd time then? This is Tzemach Tzedek explains that according to the halacha that it's only Rishus Ma'ariv. In that opinion, we don't have to say 3 times. Twice is enough. So why do we say twice in Shachris? It explains it. The bracket, those was mezok Tilo David Gimel Pam, zweimol in Shachris. Why we do it twice in Shachris? Is as need to learn a Ben Olam Habo. So that is not to become a Ben Olam Habo. But that twice is enough, according to the Ma'ad Omar, that it's Rishus, which the Allah is. Nor Blois, Shaloi Ledalig Ha'amiris Ashrei Gimel Pa'amim could come on, not to jump over of not saying 3 times Ashrei. It says later on, that's not for the purpose of becoming a Ben Olam Habo. You become a Ben Olam Habo anyways, because 2 times is enough to become a ben elam haba, and Ma'ariv accomplishes it by itself. Just not to jump over and not have 3 times, we do it in Shabbos twice. So it's very clear from the Tzemach Tzedek that the 3rd time Ma'ariv, the 3rd time Tilul David is like Ma'ariv, which is like optional, like what the Zohar explains. And that Tzemach Tzedek just says that according to the opinion that it's optional, we don't even have to say a 3rd time. Darf man verstehen, wie stimmt der Bier von Taten? How does the explanation from the father, my father, his father, as the dritter mol zogun Tilul David, the 3rd time saying Tilul David is Kimoi Valderach, it is similar and along the Tfilas Arvis Rishus, that it is optional, was Ladem Kumt Ois, according to what the Rebbe's father learns, it turns out, as that even according to the opinion that says that davening Ma'ariv is optional, you have to say it 3 times in order to be a ben elam habo. You also have to say it 3 times, as the Rebbe's father explains that you need to say it 3 times. His nor was the dritter mol is begin shvacha. There is 2 mandatory, and the 3rd time has to be said as a praise. Al derech v'tfilas arvis rishus, but they're all needed in order to become a ben elam haba. Not like the Tzemach Tzedek that says twice, according to Mal Rishus, is enough to become a ben elam haba. You need 3 times. There's a difference. 2 are mandatory, and the 3rd is optional because we get shvacha. So how does that fit with the Tzemach Tzedek? As Lamado Matfilas Arvis Rishus, he says that Tzemach Tzedek said if we hold that Tfilas Arvis is optional, is genug zu sagen 2 Mal Tilul David, then it's sufficient to say 2 times Tilul David. In order to become a ben elam haba. Basically, to sum it up, the question is, how many times do you have to say Tilul David according to the halacha that Arvis is Rishus? The Tzemach Tzedek writes that you only have to say it twice if we hold that Tfilas Arvis is Rishus. The Rebbe's father explains that you still have to do it 3 times, but one of them is an optional. It's like Arvis Rishus, but you don't have to say, but still, you still need to say 3 times in order to become a ben elam haba. The Rebbe asks a further question in Ois Gimel. Why taka do we say Tehillah David 3 times a day when, as the Alter Rebbe, as Tzemach Tzedek says, twice is enough, and the 3rd time it happens by itself according to the Mandoma Rishus? Rebbe quoted very briefly. The Rebbe is going to elaborate in the explanation of the Tzemach Tzedek. Gimel. Ich darf mir verstehen, Leuten Bier von Tzemach Tzedek, according to the Tzemach Tzedek's explanation, as lehadeya welche is kfi halacha, according to the opinion which is the halachic view, as tfilas arvis rishus, that if tfilas arvis is optional, is genug 2 Mal, sagen Tilul David zu werden a ben elam haba. It's sufficient to say 2 times Tilul David in order to be meriting the elam haba, the world to come. Why do we actually say 3 times every day Tilul David? 2 Mal zu Shachris. We say twice with Shachris. Alter Rebbe, what does Tzemach Tzedek explain? Those who the Tzemach Tzedek schreibt dort dem Tam. The Tzemach Tzedek writes the reasoning. Sheloi ledalig ha'amiras ashrei gimel pa'amim. That not to jump over saying ashrei 3 times. What does it mean? Or the way he uses, or to use the language, the words, in the language of Kabbalah and Chassidus. He explains, Tiknu loymar b'shachar is based on that the reason they instituted to say it twice In the morning, it's al derech li Yaakov asher poda es Avraham. It's similar to the idea that Yaakov redeems Abraham. So while Shachris is Abraham, and the third time corresponds to Yaakov, Yaakov redeems Abraham. Shatiferes mate klape hachesed. While Abraham is chesed is to the right, Yitzchak is gevura to the left. Tiferes is in the middle, but Tiferes, while it's in the middle, it tilts towards chesed. It is poda es Abraham. So we say the third time for this idea over here, but does gufa darhom bir. So, but that itself needs to be explained. Bald as der Zogen till David Zweimol wird men schön aben elam abo. Since by saying till David just twice, you are already a ben elam abo. Bald be'arvis wird giton me'elov, because in Ma'ariv it is on its own accomplished. The Zelbe v'du chamiris till David kenal, I said earlier, the same as through saying amir till David twice. But Shachris and Mincha, Ma'ariv does it on its own. Was fällt noch als man soll darf sagen es a dritte Mal? Why do we need to say it a third time? And here is going to lie the inner meaning, explaining how the Rebbe's father explains it, that there is still a third time, or we don't have to say it a third time. Because even according to the Tzemach Tzedek, in the end of the day, we do say it a third time. And what exactly does it mean, the saying it the third time? We can say the point, the explanation over there, as a that there's a difference between the way the Gemara says it and the way it's said in the Zohar. The Tzemach Tzedek read verzog dorten wegen das Shas. The Tzemach Tzedek discusses, as he says there, the opinion of the Gemara. According to the revealed part of Torah. If we say that the Ma is optional, so there is no place to say Tilo David during the morning in Ma'ariv. And you can't substitute Ma'ariv in Shachris. According to the Nigla de Torah, there's no third time. You don't say it by Ma'ariv, according to the halacha that Ma'ariv is optional. So you don't say it by Ma'ariv, and you can't make it up by saying it by Shachris. So you don't say Shachris when we come to Shachris either. In their Tata and the day of Zohar, as opposed to my father, the Rebbe's father, he's explaining the opinion of the Zohar, which is Al Pepinimius HaTorah, which is based on the inner part of Torah. So, the far is Oich, is Aleph. According to the Pneumius, even if Tfilas Arvis is optional, hot an ort amiras tila leDavid. So there is still reason and room for saying tila David. However, it's not at the same level, nor the amira is begin shvacha, as the Zohar says. It's to praise Hashem. But it's kimoiva derech reshus. That is similar to reshus. So there is something about saying Tila LeDavid as a shvach, as an optional. On base, the Amira for Tila LeDavid. And the other thing is that this saying of Tila LeDavid, that although it is Keneged Ma'ariv, Afal Piz is Keneged Filas Arvis, is in Armira Bepoil and Filas Shachris. The actual saying it is in Shachris. That's according to the Pnimis Inyoni. We have these 2 points. A, that there is still something about saying it and it's like begin Shvacha. And we can say it in Shachris. That's the explanation that the Rebbe's father uses in the Zohar. Und der Far is over the Tzemach Tzedek Messiah. That's why the Tzemach Tzedek concludes. Even though that according to the Tzemach Tzedek, according to the Nigla, we don't have to say Tilulav at all. He still concludes, in order not to jump over saying 3 times, we say in the Shachris, where is the noch masbe the Shaykhis from Arvis to Shachris, as he is explaining that there is a connection between Ma'ariv and Shachar Derech HaKapola, Shatalmud Shatiferes Mate Klape Chesed, that Tiferes tilts towards Chesed. So therefore, there is something about saying in Shachris, which is Chesed, which is Avraham, to bring in the Yaakov, to bring in the Tiferes, which is also, in a sense, like Chesed, like Avraham, Ashapoda as Avraham. Yaakov Shapoda. Doreter nit wegen Iker HaTakona. When the Tzemach Tzedek says that, he's not discussing the main Takona, was his blois based Ba'amim. That's only 2 times. Nor vidosis al pipnimis in yonim. This is the way it's in the inner matter of things. Even if we say that Filsav is Rishus, by Pnimis in Yonim, Zokman Tehillah L'David Gimupon, we say Tehillah L'David 3 times. So basically, it's not a disagreement between the Rebbe's father and the Tzemach Tzedek, but the contrary. In the Tzemach Tzedek words itself, you see that he says that B'Pnimis in Yonim, there is something about saying the 3rd time that Tehillah L'David. That's the same. That's based on the Zohar, that even if we hold that it's Rishus, there is a connection that you still say a 3rd time, and it can be said in Shachris. But we verstehen, hey, Bahagdim Habir v'Divrei Tzemach Tzedek, by first introducing and explaining the words of Tzemach Tzedek. So the Tzemach Tzedek writes, as anon the kaimlon tfilas arvis rishus, we that hold that davening ma'ariv is an optional. That's why we don't say Ashrei before Ma'ariv. But the P'ula from Amiras Tehillah David, we don't need to say it. Is Vadai Yumshech Me'ilov. It is for sure going to be drawn down on its own without our saying. What does it mean that for sure it's going to be drawn down? Because from them is moving. From this we understand. That we don't say Tehillah David by Ma'ariv if we say Tfilas Arvis Rishus. Why don't we say it? Is nitval azata kona is the leita elos, because there's no purpose of saying it. Because you would anyways not going to say it, because since you don't have to daven ma'ariv, then you're not going to say the Tehillah David. One can say, maybe, what does the Tzemach Tzedek say? Why should we not say Tehillah David before ma'ariv? Since ma'ariv is optional, so he may not be say Tehillah David anyways, because he's not even going to daven ma'ariv. No, that's not the reason. The Baldas Tfilas Arvis, Baldas Tfilas Arvis Rishus. Because since it's only optional, b'shvil tzoydech, or you mevatlin, also, and if there was a need, you would negate it. You wouldn't say, you wouldn't daven by it. So that's not the pshat. Nor val milachatchila darfen nit zogen es adritmo. So from the, but the way Tzemach Tzedek explains is that there is no need of saying the Torah because it comes by its own. It's not because you're not going to end up saying it, but because you don't have to say it. Because for sure it is going to come on its own. So there's no need for you to say it. But the whole ma'ariv, we don't have to say. Yet there's a hidur to say it. Why don't we say the same thing for Ashrei, for the Tehillah David? Yes, you don't have to say it, but why do we say over here, for sure it's going to get, so there's no point in saying Ashrei Why is there a point of davening Ma'ariv? Also, Ma'ariv is nimshach also on its own if we hold the Rishus. Just like, and yet we say, isn't it verstandig? So it's not understood. Just as you say about the Ma'ariv davening, as is Rishus. Why is it optional? Because that union, that Ma'ariv is supposed to make up, is accomplished on its own without having to daven Ma'ariv. After the one who is praying has made the preparation for this union that is accomplished from Ma'ariv before by Shachris and Mincha. So therefore you don't need to. So that's why it's Rishus. Und von deswegen, and yet, we say, hat man gewähnt vieles Arvis in Eifung von Rishus HaKopanim, and yet they set up that the davening of Ma'ariv should be there. Let it be in a way of an option, but it's still been set up. So there should have been the same way as far as saying Amidas Til David. Yes, it's done by itself, but we can still set it up as optional. And so the Gedav Zayin HaKol Ponim and Inyan from the Rishus, it should have been at least a matter of optional. And further, the Rebbe asks, now it's been, even though the halacha is that's Rishus, but now we have set it up that Ma'ariv is not mandatory. So also the Tehillah David in Ma'ariv nowadays should have been set a chayva, because nowadays, just like Ma'ariv became a chayva, that should be a chayva too. So why is that not oichet? Gidav zaga ayin from Rishus oichet should have at least been also a matter of an option. The Tehillah David. Why should it not apply to say Tehillah David and Ma'ariv? Both. So the Rebbe says we can say the explanation. When we talk about matters that are beyond the work that a person can reach, but rather they are done, they are accomplished automatically. After, when the person makes the proper preparation, then it's accomplished on its own, and prepares a fitting vessel in order to be able to receive, to accept the what comes as a flow, extends from above. So generally speaking, there's two categories. Number one is Aleph. There are such levels which are totally higher than the service of man. They aren't connected at all to the doing and the service of man. You can't touch it at all. Similar, by splitting of the sea, was the Eibishter had gesagt, Hashem said, you'll be silent. As darf mit sein kein tefillah, should be no prayer. But the milchome milmaila is from azah or to madrega, because the war that is taking place from above comes from such a place, such a level, such a step. Whereas his nichayich kein avodas adam, over there, it does not fit, it doesn't apply, no service of man. But adrab, on the contrary, the pomim is avodas adam evalved. Sometimes the service of man is actually confuses, interferes, is actually an interference. So that's when we're talking about such a high level. Number two is madreges velchus yishayches avodas ha'adam. We have levels in which it does connect the service of man. No, the avodah is not an inyan from chayva nor blois rishus. The work that you're doing is not a mandatory, but it's optional. So what does it mean? The asiyah sa'odam is not so oifton dam shacham. The doing of the person is not to accomplish, to bring down, extend from above. Because if it could be accomplished through the service of men, then it would have been a mandatory. It is only that in order for this extension that comes, what extends, that comes in a way of a gift from above. So, in order for it to fully accomplish below its effect completely. The dogma was that Tzemach Tzedek bring, the example brought by the Tzemach Tzedek from Haskoras Tal. We mentioned do. As loy chivu chachomim lahaskir. The chachomim did not make it a obligation that you have to mention do, because do is not unlike rain that sometimes it comes and not. So we mentioned that tal is hecher for isarusa dilatat. Tal do is beyond the arousal of below. We don't need the prayer to bring down the rain as with rain, but by do it comes on its own. Tal loy me'etzer. Tal never stops; it comes down all the time. So the din is you don't have to mention it because it'll come anyways. However, in bola haskir maskir. But if you come to mention, you could kidei sheyeh lebracha. So it should be for a blessing. So you want it to be fully. You can't bring it out. You can't draw down. It's not your avodah that could bring it down, but you could make the blessing when it comes below should be proper. The far is as in an oifen von rishus, and that's why it's in a way of an option, and it's optional. Or mibald as dos retzich wegen azach, was is hachen von avodas odom. Since we're dealing with a situation which is beyond the work of man, is as an inyan for rishus. It's an optional matter. She's nit shayich as mezol machriach sein. It is not, doesn't imply that you can force, so to speak, as the hamshocha so zayin kideboyi, that this extension should be properly. Can't force, so to say, that it should be properly, because it's beyond the avodah. The b'meila is as nit an inyan was is a choyvalon. It's not mandatory. In other words, it is not completely, it is not in the choice of the person that to force that it should be in the right place, because it's beyond the way the person. Well, now derech zeh is the inyan for tefillas avneshut. This is what we say by ma'ariv is optional. Afal pi as the yichud that evgitom b'derech memela. So why do we daven? It's accomplished by its own. But still, there is room for davening ma'ariv in a way of optional. As the yichud will zayin levrach, that the yichud that will come down, that it should be for a blessing. We can force it to be that, but there is something that we can add that it should be levrach. But that only applies to ma'ariv, but not to Tilul David. That only applies to actual ma'ariv, but not with regards to saying Tehillah David. The inyan for Amiras Tehillah David is that Tzemach Tzedek Mavayim. Tzemach Tzedek explains what is accomplished when we say the Tehillah David. Ados is ma'ir the madrega from Banant. This arouses the level, the step from where, as his maschil, shoyresh, his oiris yichud zov v'nukva. The root in which there is an arousal of the union of zov v'nukva, the midas and malchus. Bemela is verstandig. So therefore it's understood. As the Amira hat nit kein Ort mit Tfilas Arvis. That doesn't have any place in the Ma'ariv Daven. Those was mispalel Arvis ba'ifim shel reshus al kol ponim. This that we are davening Ma'ariv, even if it's just optional, is negeya belois in oifim pu'ulas hayichud. That only how its effect that it should be levracha. But nit kidei to oiftan dem yichud, but you're not in order to accomplish the yichud, because you can't accomplish the yichud. Ma'ariv is the optional. That's why it's not a chayva. It doesn't accomplish the yichud. So therefore, your davening is only to direct the yichud that it should go in the right way. Genau, as I said before, Mashen can amiras till David. Suppose say till David was kum, ma'ir sein dort vusis maschil shirish yichud. That is coming to wake up, to arouse the place where it begins the root of Yiseris Yichud, does haste, which means erdaf oifton dem Yichud. He has to accomplish the Yichud. In them is the Chaych Avodas Adam Canal. So it doesn't at all. That's like the first level in which the person can do nothing to it. There's no connection to the Yichud. It's not like Ma'ariv, which could direct it in the right way, at least. But over there, you can't even have any connection, because there we're talking about arousing the yichud from its source. And therefore, there's no room for Ashrei, for Tilul David by Ma'ariv. Ches. This is over mitzad nigla the Torah. This is because of the revealed part of Torah. Was the Langton Galia the Kuchebrichu, which reaches the revealed part of Kuchebrichu, which is the chitzoni, the externality, the Yachol HaKeser. That's, so to speak, the level of Keser. Ubemela is Nichayich Kenasiya Mitzad HaOdom. And therefore, over there, it does not apply anything that the person can do in order to accomplish a yichud. But yichud nimmt sich vom Pnimius HaKeser, because yichud comes from the inner level of Keser. So that's why al pi nigla, there's nothing to do to arouse and to touch that level. It's totally beyond the avodas Adam. As opposed to from the level of Pinchas, the Zohar was the line in Sosim de Kuchebrichu. That comes from the level of Sosim Kuchebrichu. For the revealed part of Torah, you can't touch that level, the level of Pnimis HaKeser, which is the level of Yehud. But because of Pnimis HaTorah, which the line in Sosim de Kuchebrichu, which is Pnimis HaKeser, which is the inner Keser, is do an inyan fun avoida oich in oiftam dem yichud. So then there is an avoida, a service, the work of the people to even accomplish that yichud. Nor the avoida in the madreges is nit an choiva. Working in these levels is not in a mandatory nor b'derech reshus. It is in an optional way. Because it's in a spot where the service of the person does not touch. And over there, service of the person cannot really accomplish it. Is the avodah nitin an inyan fun choiva. So then there is no obligation. Was beweist as der Adam is mechuyev machriach. If it's an obligation, that means that would represent, when you say that you have to do, that means that it connects that you have to accomplish it. That's why you're obligated to toiv tuchsan. That means that you accomplish it. As his blois anasiya, it's such a doing. Was git them odam ashayches to the minyan. It gives the person a connection to it. Was vertev giton, to what's being accomplished. You're not forcing it out, but it's just associating you to that level. That means it's an optional. And the far is mitzat pnimis HaTorah, therefore from the prospect of the inner part of Torah. Faran der inyan from Amiras Tehillah LeDavid Eich Bit Filas Arvis. So there is about saying in the Ma'ariv, which is the arousal of the also by Ma'ariv. It's connection. But the Amira is blois begin shvacham. It is in a way of praise. Which is kimoiba derech reshus, which is like optional. Which means the tafkid from the Amira, the purpose, the goal of this saying is not to schaffen machrir sein. It's not to create and force out the hamshocha from mezonos v'chulu that bring down the like by mezonos parnosa, nor sahil shavach from the Meibershtim. It's merely a praise and a song for Hashem. That's the third type. Ukidei zu madgish sein as the amida from Tehillah LeDavid is blois aninyan for Rishus. In order to emphasize that saying this Tehillah LeDavid is only an optional matter, they placed it in the Shachris, so to make sure nit vi amidas Tehillah LeDavid Shachris mincha. It's not like Shachris mincha, but mekaveg and amirosoi. That's why they said the saying nit in Tfilas Arvis, gufan nor betfilas Shachris in Shachris. So basically, according to Pnimius HaTorah, because of Sosim Deiraisa, we do have a connection. We can't force it, but we have a connection to it. Whereas according to the Nigla the Torah, according to the Gemara, the way that someone said in the Gemara, there is no connection at all. That's why there is no chiyuv at all, not even an optional. But yet to emphasize that even the Pnimis in Yonim, that it's not really something which is forces out. We don't say it in Ma'ariv, we say it in Shachris. Those Gufay Psuka de Zimra, and over there we say it in the verses of song. We say that Tehillah LeDavid was called Far Tfilah Shemini Esed the Shachris, comes in before the Midrash Shachris, the Yesh Loimar. Because we can say as their koyach to kennen halal zayin dem obrishtem mit Tehillah v'tishbachas, the power in order to be able to praise Hashem with songs and praises. Noch eder mis mispalot tefillah shmona esrei b'shachris, even before you've davened the shmona esrei b'shachris, nemt men from the yichud from tefillas arba shalifnis. You get that from the yichud of the ma'ariv that comes before that. That comes from the koyach of the yichud of the Ma'ariv, which was done by itself. The mitvat menoich verstehen was the state in Zohar dort. We understand what the Zohar says there. As parnose lechozi lemishel el basar tzloitzo uparnose the mori. You can't ask Hashem for your sustenance only after you pray and you give the sustenance of the master. Was the Far Zokman Tehillah LeDavid noch Shemona Esrei b'Shachris. That's the reason for saying Tehillah LeDavid after Ma'ariv. Und das was, and how come then by Mincha? Und das was by Tfilas Mincha Zokman as Koydim Tzloisa? Why do we say before the Dagma Mincha? Is as val noch Tzloisa the Mincha is as man for the Nakashia. But there it's a time after the Dagma Mincha. It's a time of strict judgment, so you can't say it afterwards. The Chayre isn't it move on, but it's not understood. The Zohar of the Heinem says mekenit beten if mezonos noch mincha. Let it be true that you can't ask for mezonos the after mincha, which is the two times asking for parnos and mezonos. Bas says machen in kasha. Aber wie kann es, man es beten, koidem tzloiso. But how could you do it? Okay, you can't do it afterward. How could you do it before? Noch eider metut oiv parnose de morav. You haven't yet prayed to Hashem. Zohar says there that you have to daven, and then you ask for it, and you're answering me, well, we can't do it afterward, dina kosher. But how could you do it before? But based on the above, we can say, this is the far. You already daven shachris, and bleibt adoration for tefillah shachris. So there's still a mark from daven shachris. That's what you say for mincha. And that's also the koyach that you say Ashri Psuke de Zimra because of the yichud of the koyach of the Ma'ariv before. And then Inyan is that Tzemach Tzedek Merames Bekitzer, that this idea, Tzemach Tzedek hints in short, with the Schreiben, when he writes, Tiknu Loimar B'Shachris Beis Pa'amim, that they said in Shachris twice, Al Derech Li Asher Podes Avraham, similar to Yaakov redeems Avraham, Shat Tiferes Mata Klape Chesed, Tiferes tilts towards Chesed. But this mit is Merames, there is hints, the Shayches from Amiras Tzilu L'David V'Shachris to Tfilas Arvis, the connection of saying to L'David V'Shachris to Ma'ariv, because we're saying that Tzilu L'David the third time comes because of the Ma'ariv. So the Tiferes, the Yaakov, the Ma'ariv is Podes Avraham, and that allows for the Tehillah L'David that comes before the davening. So before you did the Tzlois the Morah, and it's connected, and that's why you have the Yaakov Asher Podas Avraham, and he can do that Shachris, he can do the Tehillah the first time. This is Mesichas Shabbos Parshas Pinchas Tovshin Lamed Aleph, and Mitzvah Shabbos Kodesh Parshas Pinchas Tovshin Lamed Ches.